if you are a foreign intelligence service and you want to know what Bill Clinton says about an issue, or Prince Andrew, or Bill Gates, or anybody else that went to Epstein Island, you're not going to be able to recruit Bill Clinton. He's not recruitable. Or Bill Gates. So you do the next best thing. I mean, there were these allegations in Vanity Fair that he was in some sort of gay relationship with Les Wexner, the Ohio billionaire. And Les Wexner gave millions and millions of dollars to be his tax advisor. Les Wexner says that that's not true. Les Wexner's wife says that that's not true. So that money had to come from somewhere. I believe that he was working for the Israelis. That's really the question. You know, the black books are out there. One of them was offered for sale at Alexander Auctions. It's a Maryland auction house, and it did not meet its reserve price of $100,000 about 6 weeks ago. So the books are out there. The names in the books are out there. But not all those names necessarily, were doing anything illegal or inappropriate. The lists department would make them available, or an enterprising investigative journalist would file a Freedom of Information Act request, and he would make them, or she would make them available, but we haven't gotten there yet. I really do believe, maybe naively, that eventually we will see those lists to work against a group called Revolutionary Organization 17 November. We called it 17 November, Decafta Noemvri, 17N. There were others, Popular Revolutionary Struggle, and then all the Arabs had a presence there. The Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine, the PFLP General Command, the Democratic Front for the Liberation of Palestine, Abu Nidal, the Libyans, everybody was there. Bombs going off all the time. But specifically, we were there for 17 November because they had murdered the CIA station chief, 2 DOD defense attaches. They had shot and killed a U.S. Air Force tech sergeant. Poor guy was just doing his laundry in the basement of his apartment building. They blew his brains out. Minister of Communications, the Minister of Finance, the Governor of the Central Bank, the Prime Minister's son-in-law. Very, very deadly group. So I was very, very careful about my own security. I took surveillance and surveillance detection so seriously that the CIA made me a surveillance instructor after I got back from Pakistan a couple of years later. But anyway, this was a group that was so deadly. They had murdered 28 people. They had wounded hundreds. And not only had they never been caught, we were never able to identify a single one of them. They would do these assassinations in broad daylight in front of 2,000 people, and nobody saw a thing because they were so petrified of being the next victim. And even the Greek media called them the Phantom Organization because nobody ever saw anything. I had a 9mm and a tearaway fanny pack on my waist. I had a .38 snub nose on my ankle. And then just in case things really went to shit, I had a buck knife in my back pocket. So every day, and this is what we're all trained to do, every day you leave your house at a different time and you take a different route to work every single day. Because as soon as you establish a pattern, they know where to be standing to kill you as you go through that intersection. 1,000 got a new defense attaché, Stephen Saunders. And Stephen moved in next door to me. Our backyards abutted. And he was just such a lovely guy. He was the life of the party. We used to joke that he was a media whore because anytime anybody had a camera, he would run right up to it. And, laughing and drinking, and he was at every party, and he's on TV all the time, and he's being interviewed in the papers all the time. He's everywhere.
And I was standing with Steve and with the French defense attaché and the American defense attaché. And he was making fun of me because I had just gotten my BMW. And he said, "You Americans are so paranoid about security." He goes, "This is an EU country. It's a NATO country. What are you so afraid of?" And they all chuckle. And I said, "You Brits live in a dream world if you think that because they have palm trees and pretty beaches that they're not going to kill you if they have the chance. If they have the chance, they're going to kill you." We all laughed again. And I woke up and I looked at the clock and I was like, oh my God, I slept in. Which meant I didn't have time to do this 2-hour surveillance detection route. I just had to get on the main road, go straight to the embassy. Now, I lived in a northern suburb called Gifisia, And the main boulevard is like, let me think, 12 lanes. It goes directly from the northern suburbs, directly to the American Embassy, and then to the British Embassy. No turns, straight down the mountain. And it changes names. Once you hit the Athens city limit, it becomes, Queen Sophia Street.
So I get in the car, I get on QVCS, it's a parking lot. And I was like, oh, great. Now what am I going to say when I get there 2 hours late, right? And the thing with QVCS is it had these concrete jersey barriers. So once you were on, you were on.
You're not getting back off.
Can't get back off. So I'm inching, like literally inching. And then I did something else that I never did. I turned the radio on. Because in training, they tell us never ever play the radio because you don't want to be distracted. You know, you're humming some song, looking into space, and the assassin's coming up on your side, you know, with an armor-piercing, you know, round or something. So I turned the radio on. Avoid QVCS Boulevard. There was a traffic incident at Philothea. Philothea is the halfway point between QVCA and the embassy. I was like, dang it. 5 miles I have of this. So I'm inching down the mountain. And then a half an hour later, he says, avoid QVCS Boulevard. There was a criminal incident at Philothea. And I thought, I never heard that before. I wonder what kind of criminal incident at 9 o'clock in the morning would jam up traffic like this. And the guy says, avoid QVCS Boulevard. There was a terrorist attack at Philothea. Well, I definitely had never heard that before. And he says it just as I'm approaching was back then so dangerous for Americans. We spent more money on security in Athens than we did in Beirut. That's how dangerous it was because of this group. So we didn't have diplomatic license plates. It was too dangerous. It would allow them to more easily identify us as Americans. But the Greeks, in their infinite wisdom, gave literally everybody in the American embassy license plates that began with YHB. Everybody. It was worse than a diplomatic plate.
Because you knew.
Yeah, mine was YHB 1442. I still remember it after 25 years. My wife was YHB 1367. So I look at this license plate on this Rover, and it's YBH and 4 numbers. And I thought, oh no, they killed some poor Greek thinking that it was one of us. And then I remember, no, the British embassy is YBH. And Steve Saunders drives a white Rover. So I called the station. He said, why? What do you see? And I told him, you know, it's the white Rover. I said, it's just soaked, the interior's soaked in blood. And the driver's side window shot out. And he said, okay, get here as quickly as you can. So just as I get past the car, of course, traffic opens up. I run into the station. Everybody's waiting for me. So I told him what happened. My boss picks up the phone. He calls the British embassy. We think Stephen Saunders was just assassinated. And it's like it didn't register or she misheard. And she says, I'm sorry, Stephen's not in yet today. And he said, no, you're not listening to me. We think Stephen was just assassinated. And she says, oh my God, we'll call you right back. And then she called us back 20 minutes later and she said he had just died at the Red Cross Hospital, which ironically is next door to the British Embassy. So
they would drop a manifesto. This was an incredibly violent Marxist-Leninist group. They would drop a manifesto at the site of the hit, or they would put a manifesto in a garbage can somewhere in the neighborhood and then call a leftist newspaper to tell them where the garbage can was that they could go retrieve it. But they didn't leave a manifesto with him. They had done that once or twice before, but it was unusual. That was in April, and my boss runs into my office, and he says, did you see the manifesto? And I said, there was no manifesto. He said, no, they dropped it today. And I said, no, I didn't hear anything about it. I didn't, run my radio in the car, normally. And he said, they mentioned you in the manifesto. I said, what? Not possible. I said, I am more careful than anybody in this office with my security. And he hands me the manifesto, and it says in Greek, Iva meton megalokataskopos. We saw the big spy, that he was in an armored car, and we knew he was armed. So we elected to carry out the revolutionary sentence on the war criminal Saunders.
He said, we'll get your kids, we'll get your wife, we'll pack your house out. You got to go to the airport now. So they put me in another armored car. They took me to the airport. They picked up my wife, picked up my kids. They get to the airport. And my wife says, I want a divorce. I can't do this anymore. And that was the last day that we, lived together as husband and wife. Man, she was really something special. Normally the family members of people assassinated by 17 November, they'd go on TV and they'd be like crying and, tearing their garments and, why can't the government do anything? And she went into a TV studio as sober as we are now, and she said this was not just a crime against my husband, this was a crime against all of the Greek people. How long are you going to allow these criminals to terrorize you? They didn't do this for political reasons. They did it because they're criminals. Walking to the headquarters of one of Greece's big shipping magnates, he was going to put it under his limousine and assassinate him. And the bomb went off. It blew off both of his hands and blew out his right eye. And as he was bleeding to death, a cop ran over to him to try to, stem the flow of the blood. And the guy confessed to everything. I'm 17 November. The other members are my two brothers. Dimitris Koufontinas is the main assassin. Michalis, his name escapes me now, was the founder, confessed to everything. And then he lived. They saved his life at the hospital. And so they were able to get every last one of them. And they found the weapons cache. They found everything. They found the old typewriter where they used to write the manifestos. Everybody. The two main leaders